hell is that?
Well, the first PS5 exclusive of 2026 is here with Code Violet, developed by Team Kill Media, the guys behind the critically acclaimed Quantum Error. Alright, well, you know what, maybe not traditionally critically acclaimed, but according to the devs, they make games for the players and not critics, okay? Which is an odd thing to say given how the user score for Quantum Error is lower than the aggregate critic score. And then of course we got the user score for Code Violet. But either way, in their eyes, that's the only possible reason behind the overall weak and negative response their latest work has gotten from critics. Well, I'm here to say that I'm not a critic, I'm just some idiot with a YouTube channel, and I think that this game is absolutely dreadful. It's one of the crappiest survival horror games I've ever played, and a lot of its problems are compounded by the price they're asking. I mean, look man, I've played a lot of these indie survival horror titles on PC, some of which are good, some of which are bad, and some of which are so bad they're good. But none of them asked for 80 of my hard-earned Australian dollary dues. And that is where Code Violet differs and why I think it's more than worthy of criticism.
I just can't believe what's going on.
I mean, if this thing were even half the price, it might have been fine, but it's kind of hard to ignore all the glaring faults when the price tag's that high. Everything about this game just seems kinda shady, ain't calling me baby, why the sudden change? I mean, for starters, they didn't release this on PC, only the PS5, which they have said on social media is to prevent people from modding their game and doing unsavory things to their female protagonist. But as a lot of people have also pointed out, you can't ask for refunds for a game bought on the PlayStation Store. You know, compared to Steam, where getting a refund is a pretty easy process. The good news is that I'm hopefully going to prevent more people from falling victim to buying this thing. And to be honest, I wouldn't even need to do all that much than just post a single gameplay clip to prove my point. However, I'm really just getting started. But before I get too far into things, I do have to thank Raycon for sponsoring this video. Now that we're heading into the new year, it's a perfect time to look at upgrading your audio gear. Whether it be to help you with fitness goals or just when creating content, Raycon's new bone conduction headphones are perfect for the job. And what's cool about these is that they actually sit outside your ears. So you can listen to music or podcasts or whatever else you're doing while still being able to hear what's going on around you. They're designed for all day use too, with 13 hours of battery life, a water and dust proof rating of 68, which is about the highest you can get, plus a comfortable fit that ensures they don't slip off. And the best bit about all of this is that you're getting premium performance without a premium price tag, with the quality rivaling the bigger brands but at half the cost. Now, I've been using different kind of Raycons now for over half a decade, and I'm constantly impressed at just how easy to use they always are, with it always being super simple to connect them to whatever device I'm using. And just great to chuck on when I have some time to kill doing stuff around the house and want something to listen to while I do it, or when I'm going outside to go for a walk. 3 million customers can't be wrong, but even if you somehow don't like them, there's a 30-day happiness guarantee. So yeah, it's the perfect time to upgrade your audio gear for the new year. Go to buyraycon.com/gmanlivesbc to get 20% off site-wide. And once again, thanks to Raycon for sponsoring this video. Right, so the game opens up with a quote from Leonardo da Vinci about how every work of art begins with a black canvas, as the game opens up with a black screen of its own. And if that doesn't instantly tell us what kind of ego the devs have, then I don't know what does. The story is you're playing as a woman named Violet who's living on the planet of TRAPPIST-1e after Earth has apparently become uninhabitable. After an intro cinematic which tells us basically nothing as Violet seemingly teleported in, it then jumps ahead 6 years as she wakes up out of cryo.
Oh my god.
To find the entire place in disarray and hostile dinosaurs roaming the area and killing everyone on sight, with the goal being to reunite with your allies and escape the planet. And look, if nothing else, it is a pretty solid premise, and the whole waking up in an abandoned facility that's overrun with monsters wanting to kill you is the hallmark of good survival horror. Only you very quickly see how crappy things actually are, with this initial chase sequence from a couple of raptors being just absolutely woeful. With it obviously supposed to be tense and frightening that Violet barely manages to escape, but instead it's just laughable, especially considering how she's dressed. And on that note there, I guess we should dive into that early on here, and that's Violet's whole appearance. Where it is kind of funny looking back to how the devs said they didn't want to make this available on the PC to prevent people from making vulgar versions of the main character, where firstly it's kind of like, you know, check your ego, your game's not that much of a big deal, guys. And let's be honest, man, like Violet's no Margot Robbie or Samara Weaving. Secondly, you ever heard of the Streisand effect?
Who else knows?
But then, thirdly, and perhaps the most ironic of all, is how the game opens where they're running around in her underwear anyway. Not to mention, you'll eventually find and unlock a whole bunch of different outfits, which show off all manner of skin, and completely butcher the horror tone the game's going for. Remember how in like old survival horror games like Silent Hill 3 or RE4, how you could unlock these goofy costumes for the female characters after you'd beaten the game?
How rude!
Yeah, you know, so the whole tone and premise wasn't totally ruined. Yeah, well, in Code Violet, you can dress her up in an outfit called Badonkadonk, or wear arseless chaps for your first playthrough. But yeah, I'm sure glad that someone didn't mod in a vulgar version of the character, man. That would have totally ruined the art. And look, like, don't get me wrong, I've got no issue with this stuff, and in fact, I'm very pro this kind of stuff. I've always said that if I'm playing a game and I gotta stare at the back of someone's ass for 8 hours, well, I'd rather it be a woman's. But it just becomes pretty obvious here early on that that whole excuse the devs had for not making this a PC game as well is just total bullshit. The funniest thing about all of this too is that it doesn't even really matter because your outfits don't even carry over into cinematics, where they're just going back to the default one every time. What I think really happened here is that they tried to go for the whole Stellar Blade approach with the marketing, you know, trying to advertise their protagonist as being this similarly attractive female. The only issue is that Stellar Blade had a good game to back it up, and Code Violet obviously doesn't. And yeah, like the first thing you kind of notice about the game is just how subpar the whole thing looks. I mean, for a PS5 exclusive, this just looks really piss weak. Violet's arse cheeks kind of disappear when she crouch walks, for instance. You got that brief chase sequence from those couple of raptors, which just looks embarrassing. And all of the cinematics look like those fake gameplay trailers you'd see someone make for YouTube, with horrendous facial animations and lip syncing, combined with utterly awful voice acting.
Hello? Is anyone there?
There's this really bad channel on YouTube that's the perfect example of what I'm talking about, called Teaser Play.
I am the one who knocks.
And this genuinely looks like the kind of slop that those guys would push out back when they used to farm content.
Where are you? What is happening?
Are you okay?
There.
Along with having all the other trademark effects of the Unreal Engine 5, like with mirrors and other reflections. It's also like an incredibly static game world and doesn't really have any kind of interaction. And outside of like shooting vases for spare ammo, everything else may as well be made out of concrete. But I don't know, like maybe this was done to try to recapture the feel of those older PS1 era survival horror titles. Like after all, this is supposed to be a throwback to Dino Crisis, right? So maybe the reason is because they've tried to accurately replicate those older pre-rendered backgrounds by making the environments here completely lifeless. Nah, they just fucked up. But look, we're getting a bit sidetracked. Let's get back to the campaign. Right, so the game opens, we're alone in this facility, yada yada yada. Violet finds a walkie-talkie and gets into contact with someone named Jason, who she apparently knows very well, despite us having no idea who he is, other than that he looks like the Wish.com version of Carlos from RE3.
Violet, calm down and listen to me.
Jason says he's locked in the incubator area, which does give us our first main objective, which is to find and rescue him.
I don't know what that is.
But not before one of the many flashback scenes in the game, showing Violet as what I assume is supposed to be a young girl, even though it's pretty clear all they've done here is swap out the body but keep the same face model. Once I finally got into exploring the area after this, I head off into one of the nearby rooms and immediately got mauled by a raptor and lose half my health. So I retreated, I checked out another room, and then another raptor finished me off. So I restart, I find some ammo, I managed to actually kill a couple of raptors this time, as well as exploring the area long enough to find some items and mess around with the crafting system. Because a lot like classic survival horror titles, you're constantly finding components here which can be turned into different things, like ammo or healing items. I even find an upgrade station for my gun around here too, where I can spend a resource called mites to improve weapon stats for damage, reload times and capacity. And then after a bit more exploring, I'm killed again. This also highlights one of the game's main mechanics, is how you often start bleeding after taking damage, where the only way to stop it is to use a tourniquet or a medkit. However, as this is only 10 minutes into the game, I don't have either of those things. So every time I take damage, about all I can do here is just run around and wait for myself to slowly bleed out and die. Now, you do get bandages here, an item which is famously used in video games to stop bleeding. But instead, this is one of the components you need to craft a tourniquet when combined with steel. Or, you know, how about I combine that bandage with the bleeding wound that's slowly killing me? It also introduces another really annoying feature where a lot of the time when you take damage, Violet's not only going to be knocked on her ass, but also drop her equipped weapon. Which means you not only need to mash the X button to get back up, but then also pick up the gun and then re-equip it before you can start firing. All of which of course has to be done while you've got a Velociraptor breathing down your neck. This early area also introduces one of the other few dino types with the compies, those small little assholes that do this really annoying thing where they run up to you, attack, run off for a bit, and then just come back again. Which just becomes incredibly annoying and happens throughout the entire game. And is almost a bit of a jump scare because they're so tiny that they often blend in with the environment. Anyway, after restarting again, I try a different room, which has one of the most bizarre minigames ever to unlock it. And find myself in the kitchen, where I instantly got ambushed from behind by 2 raptors and died. And that is the other thing I want to bring up about the game, is just how crappy the controls are when it comes to aiming and shooting. I mean, it's really quite hard to overstate just how clunky the controls are. I've been playing RE4 on my GameCube for the past week, on and off, just out of boredom. And every time I go back to replay that game, I'm always amazed at just how smooth the shooting still feels all these years later. And yet, coming from that to this, a game that has come out 20 years after it, this thing is somehow worse and harder to hit anything. I think the most annoying thing is how every time you're close to a wall or any solid object, the camera kind of zooms into Violet's torso, and you quite literally cannot see what you're shooting at. Something which happens throughout the entire campaign, really just being this annoying handicap that shouldn't exist in a game like this. You know, where a couple of hits can otherwise kill you. Because there's no manual saves either at this point due to it still being very early on, I'm constantly having to retry all of these sequences over and over as I try to figure things out. For instance, I was able to soon get back into the kitchen and deal with those raptors by killing them with a grenade that was able to hit them through the wall. But even that was on my second attempt, because on the first attempt, I misjudged the massive blast radius that those grenades have. But in my defense, I mean, just look at this, like I'm standing this far away from it and it still somehow hurts me. After this, I explored a bit more of my surroundings, coming across a small gap that I need to squeeze through because, yeah, remember squeezing through small gaps? And this leads me to an area where I've got to dodge like a laser grid using a black light, like it's Metal Gear Solid. Finally finding Violet's armor with the smart suit, which doesn't really change things up all that much, apart from just apparently giving her higher damage resistance.
I found the suit.
Great.
The only other interesting thing about the suit is this whole cloak mechanic, which is a bit of a misnomer, considering it doesn't even really cloak you. It just turns you into Emma Frost from the X-Men, or at least with your clothes anyway. Where apparently you're now invisible to the dinosaurs and just can run right up to them and blast them in the face while they stand there completely oblivious. And it is actually hilarious how they don't even really bother to run away, they just stand there so defeated and cop this abuse head on. Something though which is also downright essential later on in the game when you're going up against 3 or 4 of these at once. It's also the only way you can use grenades, considering otherwise, every enemy in the game just runs right up to you for a melee attack. And as we ascertained earlier, the blast radius on those grenades is insane.
Snake, are you okay? Snake?
I'm also kind of convinced that the cloak effect only looks like this because the developers are oblivious and just didn't know how to incorporate a more traditional stealth effect. You know what I mean? Like the typical effect you'd see in any other game when you had some kind of a cloaking mechanic. Oh yeah, and speaking of oblivious, can I mention how the door sound effect when you enter the armory is literally the door sound from the original Doom? I mean, listen. And I'm convinced there as well that they didn't even include this ironically. I'm kind of guessing it's just the sound effect they went with when they were looking through whatever sound effect library they pulled all this stuff from. From this point on though, it does at least start to adhere to survival horror norms with a lot of the hallmarks. That being things like a safe room with a manual save point, plus an item box to dump out excess items and free up your inventory. You got a map screen which makes navigation easier, there's enemies that can poison you and the only way to fix it is with an antidote, plus there's old keys which can open specific locks, and your backpack size can be upgraded too. But then it also has very unsurvival horror stuff as well, like respawning items. Like if you quit the game and load back in, for some reason all the items have come back again. And every time you go back to one of those armories where you upgrade your guns, there's these ammo boxes on the walls which are almost always topped up again with randomly generated ammo for one of your weapons. Although it seems to understand the importance of inventory management, the inventory interface is incredibly clunky. And you can't stack up a lot of these items, leaving you with lots of duplicates that take up huge chunks of space. You can't combine items in the item box either, you first have to drag them to your inventory, which is just needlessly time wasting. On a positive note though, you do get the shotgun very early on here, which is another classic survival horror staple, which means I did have a better chance of defending myself and not getting killed during every single enemy encounter. Though the shotgun does have this really weird bug where if you keep pressing the reload button over and over, it does this. Which I'm sure the devs will tell us is a feature and not a glitch.
Sure, Jan.
Either way though, this is good because it's around this time in the game where it also introduces the next enemy, with the Dilophosaurus, which is the one from Jurassic Park that killed Newman. I ended up wandering around pretty aimlessly for a fair bit here, though at least I was rewarded considering the area was full of items and extra mites. Eventually running into another survivor who Violet again apparently has a very good relationship with. But as we the player obviously don't, it makes it impossible to give a shit about their predicament, seeing as we've quite literally just met them.
No, don't waste your time.
And then this next cinematic just goes on and on with another flashback sequence that's supposed to fill in the blanks. Only in reality, it's making me feel like I've just started watching a TV series from the second season without having seen the first.
Do you believe them? Trust them? Why wouldn't I?
Oh yeah, and then at this point the title card appears as well, meaning the last couple of hours have only been the prologue. Fuck! As a nice change of pace at least, we do find ourselves outside for a point, with this grand reveal of the planet supposed to be some kind of epic display of this gorgeous, lush alien world that we find ourselves in. But all I could think about here was how that cinematic in the old Turok reboot from like 2009 was more impressive. And yeah, if I'm comparing things to that game, then you know how dire things really are. This whole area just feels like an asset library dumping ground. It's a mostly opened up space that's got all these different props that just feel entirely out of place, like random nuclear cooling towers off in the distance. But I will say that it is nice to actually be able to evade the enemies for once and not feel like I'm trapped in a tin can. It all comes to an end though as we arrive at the preservation lab where Jason's trapped. Not wasting any time and heading into the Raptor exhibit because, yeah, that sounds promising. And oh, look at that, it's AI art all over the walls. That's nice. Also finding the third weapon, the assault rifle, which is about as damaging as spraying someone in the face with wet farts. And even after upgrading it in the armory, still about as effective as harsh language. There's a cinematic here where Violet does something, followed by the closest thing we've had to a puzzle yet, redirecting the flow of plasma to power up a nearby bit of machinery. And for a bit here too, I also felt like I was starting to get the hang of the combat, only, okay, maybe I wasn't. Because yeah, like even after maxing out the damage for my available weapons, they still seem to do very little actual damage to the enemies. There was a bit after this that I did think was pretty atmospheric, walking around some kind of meat packing room with all these slabs of dead animals hanging from hooks and the ground thick with fog. Only was all immediately ruined when I came across an enemy that killed me in about 2 seconds. There was a pretty decent sequence after this too, where you gotta crawl through this narrow space, avoiding jets of fire by rolling to the left or the right. So every now and then you do see these little nuggets of potential in what's otherwise a septic tank full of floating turds.
girl.
This was also when I found the Badonkadonk outfit for Violet, which makes her look like Daisy Duke. And yes, another element of the game which I'm sure is doing a great job at preserving the art. Finally, after all of this, we get to the incubator area and we free Jason, but it seems like this guy's already bought the farm, forcing Violet to give him the most awkward looking CPR I've ever seen, which amazingly seems to work, because it brings the guy back from the brink.
Hey, a little rough on the chest compressions there.
Before then showing us yet another lengthy cinematic with a bunch of flashbacks, which I will admit does at least try to establish the relationship these two had before the events in the game, as well as establishing that whoever does the facial animations in this game needs to have their job title reassessed.
I thought it may be good if she knew how. No, this is beyond unacceptable.
After this, we're then sealed off from Jason and attacked by what looks like the early design for the Predator. You know that version they showed off in all the BTS stuff for the movie back when it was played by Jean-Claude Van Damme? Yeah, that thing. Also serving as the first proper boss fight for the game, which is actually surprisingly easy. I mean, given how lethal the basic dinosaurs were, you'd think that this thing would tear you limb from limb. Only it's pretty easy to just run around the area and avoid its attacks, shooting back here and there. The devs then seized the opportunity to rip off that one scene from Alien 3, before it then inexplicably runs off and leaves us alone. Also separating Violet and Jason and forcing us to go back outside again to another opened up area. And this could have been like a really cool way to incorporate some kind of night and day cycle on the planet, seeing as that area before was set during the day, this bit could have been set at night or something. Again, like remember how back in RE4 for instance, how every time you went indoors for a bit, you'd come back outside again and the weather would be completely different. You know, simple shit. But instead, it's just the same as it was before, with nothing really changed. Same as it ever was. Same as it ever was. Just shooting more of the same couple of dinosaurs over and over, and moving through this montage of static Unreal Engine assets. You'd think as well that they might put a save point or an item box out here, considering this area goes on for well over 15 minutes. But nah man, you just mindlessly run from point A to B, having to lug all this crap the entire way. Finally, we make it to the comm facility, where the goal is to get the place up and running so they can call in for help. Where we soon run into Jason and have to watch another cinematic, where I just find myself wondering, yet again, who these people are and what they're even doing. Like, who is this lady? Why is she staunching in the room? What's happening?
It's rude to interrupt.
What? It's rude to interrupt? Why is everyone standing around? Why are they not saying anything? What is going on?
Who else knows?
Who else knows what?
Know what exactly?
Exactly, what?
That came from Earth.
What came from Earth? What is with this shot? What's with this close-up? What is going on? What? He's suddenly grown 2 feet? Are they going to make out now? And it just goes on like this too, with this cutscene going on for over 8 minutes. Or to just finally get back to the present time and tell us what we need to do in about 5 seconds, which is to go off and align some satellites.
Okay, sounds good.
Oh yeah, and I also got stuck at this next puzzle for ages. It's this bit where you gotta spin these 3 fuses around and get them in the right order, but I had no idea what I was supposed to do. I tried different combinations, I tried checking nearby journals, and nothing seemed to hint at what had to be done. So I gave up and I looked up a long play on YouTube to check out the solution, and you know what you're supposed to do here? Well, remember that blacklight that I used hours ago to get to that laser grid? Well, turns out if I have this thing equipped and look at this one spot in the room, it shows me the solution.
Oh, piss off!
And it's just like, how the fuck was I supposed to know that? After that, I encountered another raptor, and then this happened.
And it goes on like this.
Now I'm in some kind of large area filled with shipping containers, and oh look, another tight spot to squeeze through. Because isn't that what modern games do? Plus I come across some poor bloke's corpse, and Violet somehow immediately knows she has to carve the guy's eyeball out to use it a retinal scanner, despite me not even having found a retinal scanner yet. There's a weird puzzle after this too. You've got to divert power to this main door, but I just kept flipping nearby switches over and over until the whole thing worked. Where I soon found a submachine gun laying on the ground afterwards, which, amazingly, is even worse than the assault rifle. The next bit did seem kinda cool, where you're attacked by a T-Rex in the first of its many appearances, having to close all these shutters before it gets through the glass and can eat you, which I almost beat the first time. Almost. There's another chase sequence after this, which is just... yeah. And then I'm outside and have to align these 3 satellites, which is a super tedious process of running back and forth between 2 terminals for all 3. One which rotates the satellite left and right, and the other one which moves it up and down. Because for some reason, the idiot who designed these things didn't think to put both options on the same workstation. This is followed by another hilarious cinematic where Violet's ambushed by like half a dozen raptors, showing off the kind of facial expression that could be best described as mild concern, before she leaps over the edge and into this raging torrent of water in a sequence which is just flat out ripping off the Tomb Raider reboot. Yeah, can I also highlight how the water is completely static when she jumps in, only for it to suddenly change and she's now in this fast-moving current. Like, what the fuck is going on? Not that it matters, because of course it's not anywhere near as exciting or harrowing, because unlike it was in that game, where you could suffer from these horrendous deaths if you failed, here if you hit any of the objects, it just cuts to black. Oh yeah, and speaking of cutting to black, once you clear this section, it then hard cuts to another flashback where Violet and a random woman we've never seen before are now having a conversation about childbirth. Oh no, okay, I've lost it. I'm cracking. Childbirth?
Why don't we ever see the babies?
And yeah, keep this in the back of your mind because it's about to come back real soon.
Why wouldn't I?
After this, we find ourselves in another generic outdoor area in the middle of the day, which looks sparse and barren before reaching the bioengineering lab. And if survival horror games have taught me anything, it's that once you reach a futuristic looking lab area, you're near the end. Sadly, that's not the case. Fuck! I do find another weapon here though, with the shock rifle, not to be confused with the shocker, which is actually a half decent gun and does a whole lot of damage when it's fully upgraded. Also making it the 3rd automatic weapon we've been given in a row. How creative. They also find a new outfit for Violet here as well, the Wild Thing. Okay. Also, I guess we find the bone ship from Alien with this weird looking room with all these eggs. There is at least another pretty cool little sequence here where you got to move this lift around multiple levels and rotate it to access different floors, which feels weirdly complex for this kind of game. Before eventually I enter some kind of room that looks like it's powering the entire planet, and I'm suddenly ambushed by that returning T-Rex, which pops out of the ceiling periodically like a whack-a-mole, while I guess baby T-Rexes attack me on the ground. And then after seeing more AI art in the next room, followed by an ensuing cinematic that outright reveals it, it all becomes clear what's been going on here.
Why don't we ever see the babies?
Oh shit! Oh shit!
Right, so spoiler alert, obviously skip ahead to this bit if you don't want this ruined, but basically as I understand what's going on here is that Violet has some kind of rare genetic code, which means she's one of the few humans that can carry dinosaur DNA, and so they've been impregnating her with dinosaurs to propagate the species.
Come again.
The only thing is, she can only give birth so many times, so they've had to repeatedly clone her to keep this process going.
Woman cannot reproduce infinitely, so this was expected, but unfortunate.
Meaning the Violet we play as is God knows which one in a long line of women that came before her. As in, this woman has been used to breed dinosaurs over and over. And if this whole thing ain't the writer's poorly disguised fetish, then bro, I don't know what is.
Violet's eggs were fully compatible with the DNA and samples being used from the Velociraptors. A perfect match.
Oh my god!
All I can say is, who comes up with this shit?
But we have to prevent humanity from going extinct.
Not like this. Not like this.
And I can see people saying how it's no different to how the creatures work in the Resident Evil games, like how Umbrella would combine human DNA with insects or other gross things to make disgusting bioweapons. But the key difference there is bioweapons. They were trying to make weapons. So the idea of a giant humanoid cockroach or a praying mantis or whatever it was that was perpetually hostile to everything served a purpose. Either way, Violet's whole reaction to finding out all of this could best be described as mild bewilderment.
Am I... me?
You are not you. You're me.
Before her friend from that recent flashback shows up out of nowhere with Jason, saying she somehow hid from the dinosaurs all of this time by hiding in a food pantry.
I've been hiding in a food pantry for almost 2 days now.
Because a room full of food is a brilliant place to hide from predators. Predators famously known for having a fantastic sense of smell and also requiring food for sustenance.
Stupid bitch.
That'd be like saying that I hid from Winnie the Pooh by hiding in a giant honey pot. Again, who the hell comes up with this shit?
I don't really know.
Anyway, with all three of these guys together, they can get to the Star Bridge to escape, so off we go, clearing out more dinosaurs along the way. With a pretty intense encounter in these tight areas that feels like a bit of a last barrage before some kind of final encounter. Instead though, we've only just reached the waste facility, the same place this game was developed. Now we're going through some kind of sewer area, dealing with giant crocos lurking in the water, before Violet goes back to defacing corpses. This time by chopping off the finger of some poor dead asshole, along with another sequence in a morgue taking items off dead bodies. Yeah, sounds familiar. I will admit though that there was another area in here that I did think was kinda cool, where you're moving through these flooded rooms, avoiding more crocs and going against this raging torrent of water, which if nothing else was at least visually kind of impressive. Once I reach the surface I even find the Magnum, again, another classic staple of survival horror. But before I can use it, we're hopping in a Jeep and leaving the area, where as soon as I saw this perspective change, I instantly knew what was gonna happen.
Must go faster.
And sure enough, here it comes.
Again, you never give up.
Luckily, it does at least give us infinite ammo during all of this, even if Violet's body takes up like half the goddamn screen. It's not over yet either, because even after the Jeep crashes, we have to fight this thing on foot, with Violet having what's possibly the lamest insult ever. But again, like the Jean-Claude Van Damme fight from earlier on, it's almost impossible to die here, because about all you need to do is run around and just not stand still, shooting this thing every now and then before repeating the process. Which kinda deflates the whole encounter just a little bit, you know what I mean? Like if you're not even remotely concerned about the giant dinosaur that's trying to kill you. Violet doesn't even have any kind of cool one-liner when she kills it either, she just turns around and shows it her finely toned ass. Also having a hilariously bad breakdown shortly after this where she laments the death of her friend, where they couldn't even be bothered to animate in the impact shots from that pistol hitting the T-Rex.
You killed her!
The game then fades to black where we get another Da Vinci quote, and for a second I foolishly thought the whole thing was over. But no, it's still going. And now we're at the transportation station, which, you know, others would just call a train station, looking for more survivors.
No, this can't be real.
Running into that lady from the earlier flashback who's amazingly still alive, and manages to be the first character I've ever seen in a video game to somehow overact with their facial expressions.
Said didn't need them anymore. All he needed was you.
Plus, she also admits that she's the one who let the dinosaurs free, so yeah, thanks for that, lady.
I let out the dinosaurs.
Stupid bitch.
After this, we're now on a train that looks like it was built during the Industrial Revolution and attacked by, you guessed it, more dinosaurs. And at this point, I've had it with these motherfucking dinosaurs on this motherfucking train, where at first my guns didn't even work properly and I had to let myself get killed. Even when my guns did work though, this area was really challenging, being a literal gauntlet of just never-ending enemies. Also, I thought this was supposed to be one train, but apparently it's 3 trains running side by side. And also a train that appears to be near endless because goddamn son, this just goes on and on. Finally though, it mercifully comes to an end where Violet has another super weird vision where this happens. Okay. And then as she wakes up, she turns into the goddamn Doomslayer, activating some kind of rage mode as dinosaurs spawn in, but she's able to kill them in seconds with this newfound power.
Rip and tear until it is done.
Then finally we're at the so-called Star Bridge, which for some reason is set inside a giant mansion. And I won't spoil the ending, but I will say that it's pretty piss-weak stuff, and that also the game finds yet another way to work in a Da Vinci quote. All topped off with a quick epilogue sequence showing Violet about to lay a smackdown on a group of raptors before it cuts to the credits. You unlock a new game plus mode after this and then an extreme difficulty, but I can't imagine why anyone would bother. I mean, I'd rather shit in my hands and then clap. By this point, you're probably thinking that I didn't need to spend 30 minutes talking about all of this stuff to begin with, but weirdly, the response I've seen online has been mostly positive, and there's a culture around this game that's just truly odd. There was a weird thing pre-launch there as well, where they only seem to provide code to smaller content creators and safer creators, that being the kind of people who don't really make critical videos and make neutral content like long plays, which we can see in the case of someone like the Rad Brad or Champs Network. On Twitter as well, I've also noticed accounts with very little followers that say they're reviewers also coming out and praising the game. But then I've not seen a single big or even smaller YouTuber or streamer coming out and saying the same thing. I mean, even DSP of all people rage quit this game.
What the fuck just happened? What just happened? What?
On their official Twitter page as well, the devs seem to pretty much retweet every positive thing they can find about the game from every single account, mostly small ones. And like, look, that's not illegal and they're totally allowed to do that, but it does seem like a pretty obvious attempt there to cover up how shoddy the game actually is, along with otherwise burying their head in the sand and overlooking any actual criticism from the safety of their self-made echo chamber. And I think at the end of all of this, it would have been fine if it wasn't as expensive as it is. Like I said earlier, I played quite a lot of these cheaply made survival horror titles, and I can tell you that the main factor that differs between Code Violet and the rest of them pretty much comes down to the price. In fact, if this thing had been $15 or even $20, I probably wouldn't have even made this kind of video. But charging the price they did for it, along with releasing it on a platform that doesn't really offer refunds, I don't know, it just seems kind of scummy, man.
Am I real?
Now, the common argument I've been seeing from people defending it is that it's a game made by only 4 people, and while that is an explanation, it's also not an excuse. I mean, the Hollow Knight games, for instance, were also largely made by like 3 or 4 people, and something like Stardew Valley was made by 1 person, and look at how those games turned out. Other examples include Labyrinth of the Demon King or Total Chaos, both also indie games made by mostly solo developers, and both of which run rings around this thing and cost a fraction of the price. So I just don't think that argument really has validity when the indie genre is bursting at the seams with quality titles made by similarly sized teams. Overall, if you've been hanging out for that Dino Crisis successor, well, this ain't it. And in fact, if you're just after a decent survival horror game, this ain't it either. If you're after a survival horror game where you get to dress someone up in different outfits and kill lots of monsters, well, go play The Killing Antidote instead. And hey, like, if you want to play a Dino Crisis style game, like, why not just go play Dino Crisis? I mean, that shit's on goodoldgames.com now, and from what I understand, pretty stable and easy to play. At this point, if you still do choose to spend your money on Code Violet, well, look, there's nothing wrong with that, and obviously I can't stop you. But at least I can know that I did my best to warn everyone.